All right, today I have a short video for you. It's a Q&A, some conversations I've had with clients over the last week. And I believe they're actionable things that you can just take away and implement into your life. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to get back into the gym after a break. Let's say it's vacation. In this case, I had a client who went away for a couple of weeks and they're having a little bit trouble getting back into the routine, but they wanted to know how I approach the gym after that first week back. Now, as far as the motivation is concerned, I just suggest pulling the Band-Aid off. Of course, it's going to be a little bit difficult. Your routine was much different, food was probably different, and you just weren't as rushed. So getting back into the flow of everyday life, really just get back into the flow, and pretty soon that just kind of works itself out. But as far as how I approach the gym after, I've always done well with just cutting my weight back 10 to 20%. Volume stays the same. Intensity really stays the same, but obviously if your weights are different, the intensity is going to kind of work itself out. Given that I'm playing the long game here and I'm not trying to get injured, you are at an increased risk of injury after not having lifted, and you don't just want to jump back in and go super high intensity. So there, just 10 to 20%. Again, keep the volumes the same. You don't have to cut out any exercises unless you're just like overly fatigued for some reason. But you could do that for just a week and then see that next week how you're feeling in the first workout and kind of jump back to normal or pretty close to normal. So maybe hold back 5%. But after that week, you should be fine. Again, during that week too, you could focus on warming up just a little bit more, hit a couple of more not working sets, but warm-up sets, just to make sure you're mentally dialed in as well as physically dialed in. But with the reduced weight, I think you'll be fine. Seems to have some great success in approaching coming off of a layoff just like this. That's a protocol I follow. Now, as far as question 2, I had a client who we've had some really great back and forth conversation on the speed of the goal. So to begin with, they have a goal of fat loss and calorie deficit, that was the goal. We had an initial goal to, kind of over 2 months by their birthday. And as they were approaching that goal, I think the reality for most people sets in that I have to change behaviors. And this isn't calling that client out. This is the process. It's how does this work within the confines of my life? And so for me, yes, I could present options, but it's always better, in my opinion, if it's client-led. And what I mean by that, and in this case, the client said, hey, what do you think if, we stick with a moderate deficit, but I set 5-pound weight loss goals, and then it's just kind of vacillating in between maintenance. Now, there's some pros and cons as to why you wouldn't want a diet to go on indefinitely. The mental fatigue, having to cut out specific foods depending on the level of the deficit, decreased energy, libido, those type things. But on the flip side, adherence tends to be higher if the client is fully on board with the plan. And in this case, the client came to me and suggested this. So I thought it was a fantastic idea. He understood that he's not after maximal progress all at once. And he was okay with going through periods of the weight ticking back up a pound or two, or just staying the same and then kind of dropping back down and slowly but eventually hitting his goal. Like, it allowed him to eat out more with his family. He's very busy with work trips, business dinners, business lunches. So in the confines of his life, in the context of his day-to-day life, it just flowed better. So those are one of the things where you have to take into consideration the client and not just the results at all cost. And lastly, I had a client ask me how I approach cheat meals. So I know that triggers some people. I personally don't care what they're called: off-plan meal, cheat meal, break and diet, I don't know. Just eating things outside of the normal routine. That could be because a friend calls you and wants to meet up and it's just unexpected, or it could be a planned thing. But typically, and more these days, I like to handle off-meal plans as much as possible. If you could just fit them into your calories, then just do that. That way you don't have to stress the day before, the day after about cutting calories, and especially if your goal is fat loss, like where you're falling on that scale, no pun intended, but having to maneuver meals, cut calories from, 2-3 meals, which is an option. But again, if you can just work it in. So what I like to do in those days is, let's say you're going out for wings and beer. Just go ahead and add those things in your dinner, and then just make your other meals fit in your whatever your caloric intake that you have left over, that is. Now, the other option that I really have kind of been leaning on more and more, especially if it's just a one-off thing. Now, we're not talking about having weeks and weeks and weeks doing this day after day, because then you can actually see the scale go up, consistently overeating. But if you have an off-meal plan, is to just accept it. Like, try not to overeat too much to where you're making jokes about how you need to be wheelbarrowed out of the restaurant or wherever you may be. But even in those cases, I like to just jump back into my normal routine the day after. And that's what I advise for clients. Just take it as, hey, you may have needed that. We have talks around it. Were you stressed out? Do you have anything going on? Is the calorie deficit too aggressive? Have we been doing this too long? Do you want this goal? Is it the right goal for the season of life you're in? But outside of those things, sometimes things come up. A buddy calls, wants to meet up, football season's kicking back off, those things happen. Jump back into your plan the next day, and it's not going to make that much of a difference. It'll level itself out after a few days generally. But those are 3 things that I've dealt with in the past week that I thought would be great for this, and actionable too. And so, like, things that are constantly happening, and it's just, how do you adjust to those things? But if you found value in this, please hit the like button, subscribe, share it with a buddy, and I will see you next time.